Revolutions don't happen from one day to the next. It takes a long time to plant the seeds. My name's David Dorado Romo. I'm an historian and I specialize in the history of the US-Mexico border. And my specialty is the Mexican Revolution here along the US-Mexico borders. In the early 20th century, you had a dictator who favored foreign companies, especially like American mining interests, railroad, other corporations. So what he would do is, a lot of times he would forcibly displace, especially native communities, indigenous people like the Yaquis, and then give the lands to the rich and the wealthy. So it was very much a rich get richer and the poor get poorer type of system. There was very little freedom of press. So a lot of the journalists that had been arrested, like for instance, the Flores Magón brothers, would come here to El Paso and carry out their journalism and their activism against Mexico.
My name is Cindy Medina. I'm a genealogist and history activist. The revolution in El Paso is crucial. It was one of the biggest migrations. A lot of us that live in El Paso, we most likely have a grandparent, great-grandparent, great-great-grandparent that migrated here during the revolution. Either they exiled or there were deserters, whatever the case may be. It was one of the biggest migrations into El Paso, Texas.
Before that, migration from Mexico hadn't been so great. El Paso plays a huge role. And the reason that it played such a huge role was because we had trains that went north and south, all the way to Mexico City. We had trains that went east and west, like from, I don't know, St. Louis to San Francisco. At that time, Porfirio Diaz had been in power for 35 years. You had a whole bunch of revolutionaries that used houses like these as plotting grounds and to carry out espionage, to carry out arms smuggling, recruitment. So El Paso is full of these kinds of sites. A lot of them still exist today, like this one, the Kyriakopoulos house.
This house was owned by Mr. Kyriakopoulos. This home is so important because when Villa was secluded here in El Paso, Texas, after escaping from jail in Mexico City, and he was able to make it into El Paso, and things were not coming about still in Mexico. This is most likely where all his ideas came about to form La División del Norte. And so this house definitely has a lot of passion, a lot of history of what the future would be for General Francisco Villa.
So usually people like to portray Pancho Villa as a kind of Frito Bandito figure, right? With a big hat and a mustache. Here you see him in a business suit. And he's riding, if you look closely, a motorcycle. It's an Indian motorcycle. And he would purchase these motorcycles in a neighborhood known as Duranguito here, or it was known as the First Ward.
Mi nombre es Francisco Villa, soy bisnieto del general Villa por el lado de la señora Manuela Casas de Parral, Chihuahua. Yo fungo como secretario en la Fundación Visión Villista. The history of Pancho Villa in El Paso and Ciudad Juárez is an example of what is happening in the border today. And I think that's why Pancho Villa is still alive in El Paso. The thing is that the borders doesn't exist. And I think that Ciudad Juárez and El Paso share Pancho Villa, and that's why it's alive.
Pancho Villa is an extremely complicated figure. And so he used El Paso as a base of operations. He started off with 8 revolutionaries, and within a few months, he had an army of 60,000 people. So that was an incredible story, and El Paso was his launching pad.
Pancho Villa is the hero and the villain, and of the history. I also believe that Pancho Villa in the United States has a dual situation. I feel that he has these two faces. The faces of this hero, like Billy the Kid and all these heroes from the West, you know. Y la otra, que es importante también verla, este revolucionario que se atrevió a atacar a Estados Unidos.
There were places like the top of the El Paso del Norte Hotel that is still there, where people would get on top of the rooftop to watch the Mexican Revolution. And so like they would cheer like if it was some kind of boxing match or something, right? They would applaud, they would sell them. They would pay between 25 cents to a dollar. And if the battle didn't materialize, they would give them their money back. So it was something else, right? So there are many, many buildings that have that kind of Villista history. This one is down here in Sunset Heights as well. And it's one of the buildings where Pancho Villa met with General Hugh Scott to negotiate what's going on in Mexico, right? So you're seeing that these sites give you kind of a sense of the importance of Pancho Villa. And of course, we have the Pancho Villa Casa Clandestina. They call it the stash house. There were suspicions that it was being used to smuggle weapons into Mexico, right? So all these houses will give you a different perspective of what the Villista movement was about, what this revolutionary movement was all about. In a lot of those houses, this is from 1927, around the time of the revolution, a lot of those buildings still exist. Unfortunately, not enough has done to commemorate them, to bring them to light. I mean, if we knew how rich our history was and we really promoted it, people from all over the world would come to these places. But the people here in El Paso don't know our history, right? It hasn't been taught to us in our schools. We don't know just how rich our history is, how important it is. Because we're talking about the first major social revolution of the 20th century. El Paso had a central role, and like most people haven't heard about that, right? That's not something that they teach you in school.
In regards to the Mexican Revolution, it's definitely a hot topic right now for many individuals nationwide and worldwide because they're finding out after doing their genealogy research that they were related to revolutionary, not just Pancho Villa. It could have been Pascual Orozco, Madero, or just an individual that participated in these important battles. And it doesn't have to be on the revolutionary side only. It could have also been on the government federal side. They both felt that we're doing the right thing. So honoring our ancestors and doing our genealogy research and finding those gems, those pictures, those documents, we're putting up these ancestors that definitely went through a struggle.
So history is what makes us rich. And in the past, I think that the history of El Paso has always been seen as a kind of cowboys and gunslingers, the Wild West, conquistadores, and what have you. But I think the Mexican Revolution brings to light a different part of us. It's the story of intellectuals, of curanderas, of extremely complicated people. And these are brown people, these are Mexican Americans, Mexican exiled people that lived in these places, and they had global connections. So here you have an Italian family and a Greek family, and they met Pancho Villa in Chihuahua, right, in northern Mexico. So all kinds of stories that we have no idea about. And I think it's time for us to bring that other side of history. Because yeah, gunslingers and all that, you know, a lot of people have fun watching that, but that's not the real story of El Paso. I think the Mexican Revolution is closer to the real story of El Paso than those other stories.